Alright, inshallah, we're going to start in 30 seconds. Sorry for the delay here. We were trying to set up the live stream. Alright. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Almighty Allah. I invoke His peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask Allah to extend His blessings to the Prophet's family, his companions and their followers, and the men and women that walk in their footsteps. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among them. Ameen. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair for being here or following us on the live broadcast. This is the Tafseerah program. We study the commentary on the Quran in the order of revelation. And we are now on Surat al-Baqarah, alhamdulillah, very close to finishing the surah. In fact, tonight, inshallah, we are on ayah 260, ayah 260. And so inshallah, we're almost there. A few more sessions, inshallah, and Surah Al-Baqarah is over. This is, I think, session 28, if I remember correctly. And we said that Surah Al-Baqarah is the constitution of this ummah, and it bears its marching orders. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the command, and we obey. And as we said before, this is a surah about Imaratul Ard. It's a surah about causing this earth to thrive in accordance with the plan and the purposes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not ours. Imaratul Ard means to build the earth, to cultivate the earth. And I said that the surah is divided into 4 major sections. We are at the end of section 3. Section 4 is the last 2 ayats, so that's that's very small part. So sections 1, 2, and 3, those are the largest ones. So section 3, we said before that section 3 basically covers the foundations of Imaratul Ard, and those are al-fikru wal-mal, intellect and wealth, good ideas and good finances, basically. And we're still covering the section about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us in Surah Al-Baqarah that having good ideas about God and about the world is basically a prerequisite for building a godly civilization. We've seen what we've covered thus far. We've seen Ayatul Kursi, and Ayatul Kursi established Tawheed, the meaning of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His uniqueness. It established cosmology, the causality of the universe. We've covered God's unique attributes, His unique qualities, and so forth. That was essentially what Ayatul Kursi is about. It's about correcting our understanding of God, helping us see God in a light that is conducive to worshiping Him, as opposed to thinking of God as someone that loses a wrestling match to one of His creation, or God who, for mysterious reasons, sends his own son, who is divine but not divine, who is godly but still made of flesh and bones, to the earth in order to die on the cross for the sins of humanity, which is, to say the least, would be a very, very twisted and complicated way of doing business. And so doing away with the wrong assumptions about God and adopting the right assumptions about God is a necessary condition for us to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly, and therefore we are capable of building a civilization that is conducive to the purposes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then there was La ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in religion, and we've covered that as well. And we said that this particular paradigm establishes freedom of thought in Islam. God gave you the absolute basic right of making your own choice when it comes to God, when it comes to who to worship and which religion to follow, and so on and so forth. And then we've covered the story of Ibrahim and the powerful king. Some commentators say that he is a Namrud of the Babylonians, the Nimrod. Be that as it may, perhaps the designation is vague enough that Ibrahim alayhi salam had a conversation with some powerful king. We don't know who that person is. And in that conversation, it showed us that the importance and the necessity of reason and rationality to ascertain the existence of God. It's not about coercion, it's not about force, it's not about pushing people or getting angry or getting hot-tempered or getting emotional. You establish the existence of the Creator through reason and rationality. We also covered the story of Uzair alayhi salam. Some say he was a prophet, some say he was a great worshipper of God, a great pundit of the Hebrews. And I said that Uzair is a descendant of the Jews in diaspora, after they were basically taken by, the Persian king Nebuchadnezzar. So he's a descendant, hundreds and hundreds of years after his ancestors were taken as slaves by the Persians. He is a rabbi, a descendant, of Jews in diaspora who came back to Palestine. They came back to the city of Jerusalem. Initially, he thought that his mission was to restore Jerusalem, but when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to die for 100 years, and he was resurrected or came back to life afterwards, he realized that Jerusalem was restored without him. So, he figured Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted me to be an example that inspires people to restore Jerusalem and not just me. And we said that the story of Uzair, again, helps us build the type, the right type of ideas, right? Showed us that essentially civilizations will always rise and fall. That is a law of the universe that's not going to change. Even Islamic civilization, has its ups and downs. It also shows that the righteous will suffer sometimes, to combat this idea about, why are bad things happening to good people? Well, that happens all the time, and it's okay, right? It also showed us that the unrighteous may prevail for a while. That is also a law of the universe. It also showed us that change takes time, and finally, nothing stays the same. Everything is mutable except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So again, this section of Surah Al-Baqarah is interested in basically reteaching the mind about the right ideas that are necessary for us to build a civilization. Tonight's conversation, inshallah, is an extension of that, right? And I wanted to start the conversation with a statement in Latin and just see if any of you heard this statement before. Cogitu ergo sum. Cogitu ergo sum. If you have not heard, this statement before, it's a foundational statement of what is today Western civilization, Western philosophy. This is, in English, it would be, I think, therefore I am. Or I think, therefore I exist. This is a foundational statement of what is known to be Cartesian doubt. Cartesian doubt, after René Descartes, the great French philosopher, who essentially was one of the earlier philosophers of the Renaissance. And Descartes instituted this methodology, right? And that is, I need to doubt the existence of everything and start from scratch, all right? And the very first thing that I need to establish is that I exist. I mean, it'd be like, a bummer if I don't exist in the first place. So I need, then we would not be having this conversation. There'd be no point in thinking or writing or publishing books or going to teach at the university, right? So he doubted the existence of everything. He doubted the existence of, the pen and the paper and the chair and his wife and everyone, right? And then he started with himself. Do I even exist in the first place, or I am the figment of someone else's imagination? And so, cogitu ergo sum. If I think, that means I do exist. Otherwise, who is doing the thinking if it's not me? Okay? This is how he started. It started by doubting, the methodology of doubt. And through doubt, René Descartes is trying to establish the existence of God. Essentially, this is a deeply committed man. He's raised Catholic. He probably has some ideas about God, that preceded his philosophical acumen. But his his philosophical methodology was sound, right? And now doubt has become the foundation of Western philosophy. Everything is doubted, basically. So based on this, Descartes propelled his own version of the ontological argument. And I will talk about this for a second, but again, I wanted you to pay attention to the concept of doubt here. All right? You don't take things for granted. You always ask questions. You always take risks. You don't take anything as fundamental. Everything needs to be brought to question, including the very idea of God itself. In fact, including the very idea of my existence. All right? There's I think a couple of years ago I raised this question. All right? We're sitting right here in this room. There's a certain number of people. There's a few people that maybe are watching the video broadcast. All right? When did you wake up this morning, Brother Hisham? Before 5. Like 5:30ish, 5:10ish. Yeah, I woke up at 5:30, right? Mustafa, when did you wake up? 5:20. All right. I don't want to embarrass anyone if you didn't pray Fajr. And then I woke up at 10:30 this morning. So this is an example, right? So all of us woke up this morning at some point. All right. Some woke up at 5. Some woke up at 5:30. Any of you did not get any sleep yesterday night? No. So we've all had some sleep. Now, if someone came and told you, since you woke up until now, okay, that's all the memories you have, because these are things that you've seen with your own eyes. I know what I had for breakfast after I woke up, and I know who I saw, and I know the car that I drove to work, and I know who I met at work today, and then I came to Jumaa, I know what the Imam spoke about, right? It's all fresh in our memories, right? So we're able to, with some degree of certainty, we're able to ascertain that today's events actually took place, okay? But what if someone came to you right now and said, everything prior to going to bed yesterday night is actually not true, and it was recorded in your brain by some kind of an alien power or some kind of a superpower. Every memory prior to waking up this morning was given to you artificially, and it actually not something that ever existed before. Do you have a possible way of refuting that statement? Most philosophers would say no, not particularly. Because if your way of ascertainment is, I left my car parked at that place, someone would say, what if somebody else had parked it for you, and the memory of leaving the car was implanted in your brain? If you said, well, I just need to verify with my mom, what if the memory that was given to you is the same memory that was given to your mother, and both of you were deceived? There is nothing, literally nothing, except our faith, of course. And faith is not an empirical standard, right? And so if today someone questioned or doubted our very existence prior to this moment, okay, it would not be an illegitimate type of doubt, okay? We would, of course, I'm not suggesting that humanity started yesterday night or this morning, and that's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying it would be a difficult undertaking for you to actually verify that you've existed prior to today. I know that's a very unsettling thought. Right? It's a very unhinging thought. But be that as it may, the point is there is nothing wrong with doubt as long as after that doubt we're able to put enough intellectual and mental effort in order to ascertain the truth. So maybe one of you would be smarter than me and say, oh, actually there is a way to verify that we've been around a lot longer than just one day, okay? And so Descartes started his philosophy with, what we call Cartesian doubt. Doubt everything, find God by asking all kinds of questions. And so he started by establishing his own existence, and then he goes into establishing the existence of the Creator, and he follows what we call the ontological argument. And the ontological argument for God is based entirely in reason. It's not based on any observation. It's all a mental exercise. So unlike the cosmological argument, for example, which is, okay, the universe was caused, therefore it has someone that caused it, that is an observational argument, because you've looked at the universe and you've reached a certain empirical conclusion. Ontological perspectives come from the word ontology, which means the existence or the being of something. So the thought process of Descartes was as follows. All right, he starts with the first premise. He says, we have an idea in our mind about the most perfect being. All right? I mean, in this room, maybe one of us is better than the rest. But if that person is compared with other people in Roseville, maybe there's another person who will be better than them. And if the best person in Roseville is compared to all of Placer County, maybe there's going to be somebody else that is better than them. And if they're compared to everyone in the state, and everyone in America, and everyone in the entire world, and everything in the universe, at the end of the day, there's got to be one thing. Okay, I didn't say God yet. Okay, there's got to be one thing that is more perfect and greater than anyone else. Is that a correct premise? Right? If I keep following this logic, then there's got to be at least one thing that is better than anything else. So the notion of perfection, a perfect being, does exist in the mind, right? As a premise. Premise number two: existence is a form of perfection, right? If that being is not real, then that would be an imperfection. If we're talking about a unicorn, for example, that you can ride and travel, all kinds of places and fly, and and it has all these beautiful colors, and its tail, goes like this and takes you instantaneously to another country, that's such a cool thought. What is cooler than that thought is if the unicorn actually existed in reality. And so existence is a form of perfection, and lack of existence is a form of imperfection. All right? So, number one, we have an idea in our minds about a perfect being. Number two, existence is a form of perfection. Therefore, it would follow that a perfect being must exist. That's the ontological argument in the version of Descartes. All right? Doubt everything, but then start with reasonable premises until you reach a certain conclusion. So if we have an idea already, every single one of us, of a perfect being, and if existence is a form of perfection, then the perfect being must exist. And if you want to call that perfect being XYZ or Jehovah or God or Allah, doesn't matter at the end of the day. There's got to be the most perfect being of the universe, that has achieved the absolute highest level of perfection, that has absolutely no room left for any further perfection. Because if there's any room left for further perfection, then it's not the perfect being. So if that being exists, then God must exist. This is what Descartes said. Of course, the ontological perspective was debated over the centuries, to no avail, in my personal opinion. I think all the attempts to shoot down the ontological argument were not successful. That's my view. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a world today where people pride themselves on the fact that they are willing to doubt anything and everything. We're so smart, we love to doubt things, You have to prove it, you have to show me, you have to establish it, I need the dalil, I need the evidence, I need the proof, right? We do that, and this is what we've established in our world today. This is how people use in order to oppose the idea of God. They will tell you, you want to say that God exists? Okay, I'm doubting that God exists. You have to show me that God exists. What is your proof that God exists, right? And if you say something like, well, I feel the presence of God innately in my heart, right? So that's not proof enough. I don't share your feelings, okay? And so we live in a world where the idea of doubt has become very, very essential. Although I think that Generation Z is kind of reversing that trend. That now more and more things are about feelings and emotions, more and more feelings about, the heck with reality, the heck with rationality. I would rather follow my passion. I would rather follow how I feel. I would rather follow my gut. Right? You hear that, a lot in this day and age. It's almost like a modern reincarnation of Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, his philosophy was all about feelings. Okay, and so for like about a couple hundred years, the perspectives of Rousseau disappeared, and I think they're kind of making a comeback today. We live in a neo-Rousseauian existence, if you will. Interestingly, the Quran celebrates the methodology of doubt 1400 years ago. The Quran celebrates doubt. The Quran tells you Don't reach any random conclusions. Doubt everything and ask all the questions that you want. And follow the premises step by step and figure things out. It's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, the Quran doesn't tell you take things on faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly in the Quran tells you, look at yourself, look at your digestive system, look at your liver, look at your heart, look at your eyes, look at the universe around you, look at the chirping birds, look at the flowing rivers, look at the mountains, look at the laws of gravity, look at the laws of physics, look at the universe. Don't take my word for it. Go observe yourself. Use your own reason. See, observe, that's, cosmology. Use your own reason, that's ontology, all right? So Ibrahim alayhi salam was a prophet of God, loved by God. God calls him Al-Khalil, my friend. Of all of God's creation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this right there, is no normal prophet, is no ordinary prophet, he's my friend. The Creator himself calls a human being my friend. And he has this constant rapport with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, he doesn't see God either, right? This is all metaphysical. So he did not see God. He feels the presence of God. He hears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak to him, through Jibreel alayhi salam, but he never actually saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Ibrahim alayhi salam asks Allah to show him how things are resurrected. After things die, how are things resurrected? It's a legitimate question. Some might say, why are you asking that question? Like literally, if someone came to me today, it's like, Imam, I want you to prove Islam to me by showing me how things are resurrected. So, let's go ahead and murder a little mouse. And I want you to show me how that mouse is resurrected. We're going to call that blasphemy. We're going to say, oh, your iman is weak. What do you mean? Like you need to see it with your own eyes in order to, you have to believe. He doesn't go to another man. He goes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, as Allah says here in ayah number 260, Rabbi, arini kayfa tuhil mawta. Lord, show me how you resurrect the dead. The absolute most amazing thing is that there is a hadith. In the commentary, Imam Qurtubi cites a hadith from the Musnad where the Prophet ﷺ, when he recited this ayah, he paused and he said to the Sahaba, remember the story of Rasulullah when he came to Medina and he saw that, the Jews, they fast on the day of Ashura? What did he say? When they said, we honor Musa alayhi salam, because that's the day Allah delivered the Israelites from Egypt. What did Rasulullah say? نحن أولى بموسى منكم. نحن أولى بموسى منكم. We are more deserving of Musa's legacies than you. We should fast. This is the same exact thing that Rasulullah said sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he recited that ayah. He says, نحن أولى بالشك من إبراهيم. He said, نحن أولى بالشك من إبراهيم. We are more deserving of the methodology of doubt than Ibrahim alayhi salam. Some commentators say that this was the way of Rasulullah of saying to everyone, doubt all you want, ask all the questions. If Ibrahim asked it, then we should ask the same and more. If Ibrahim had his own doubts, and I will tell you, by the way, what does it mean for a prophet to have doubts? It's not like the doubt that you and I have. This is very different, right? But if Ibrahim asked these questions, then we should ask those questions and more. Essentially instituting the methodology of doubt, 1,000 years before Descartes. All right? So we should not call it Cartesian doubt. This is Quranic doubt. Ask the questions, doubt things, and start from scratch, and then build it up. But once your mind arrives to the shores of safety, now you need to stop with the doubting and start building. Right? You can't be in a state of doubt for the rest of your life. But you're entitled to doing it once. Go through the process. Take your time. Year, 2 years, 3 years. Take your time. Doubt. Ask the Imam. Read. Go on the discussion boards. Go on the Facebook pages. Do your own research. Read the books. Go to Barnes & Noble and sit in the faith section and keep reading books about atheism all you want. Right? Engage in the process to the fullest. But then gradually you're building the bricks of your faith, one after the other, piece by piece. In my God and philosophy class, 2 years in a row, I taught the class. and I had, maybe, about 60 students each, at least in the first trimester. That's about 120 students. Usually, the numbers decline, as the class progresses. It's about 32-hour sessions, so it was pretty long. But by the time I think I was done, I would average about 25 to 30 students, okay? I think that what we did in those 2 years, and I'm actually, one of the projects and scholars that I want to work on is that I wanted to summarize the content of God and philosophy into like, a concentrated sort of like a weekend course. All right? 16 hours, 8 hours on Saturday, 8 hours on Sunday, kind of like, they're fry their brains, over just one weekend. But the point is, I was able to see it with my own eyes, with particular students. And there's a lot of students that were parents and teachers and mothers and fathers and so forth that wanted to learn in order to strengthen their faith, but also help their kids. Some teachers attended because they wanted to be able to address, inquiries raised by their own students. But I also saw a couple of people that came because they had doubt, because they themselves were doubtful. And I could see the construction of faith happening over time. I could see the type of questions evolving. And I see the type of confidence forming, right? It was the most rewarding thing for me, as a teacher, is to actually see that, because that's when you realize that the purpose of your course, have been fulfilled. And so to feel in my heart that this is an essential methodology that the Quran sanctions, that's incredible. Like, what kind of progressiveness was that? In an age where conformity was the norm. Everyone was forced to follow the religion of their kings and their leaders and their tribal chiefs. There's no such thing as freedom of thought. No such thing as liberty to choose, right? La ikraha fi din. 1400 years ago, unheard of, right? To be able to ascertain the existence of God through reason and conversations, unheard of. To think of the uniqueness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His tawheed, not unheard of. Most of humanity was in a state of shirk, committing polytheism and so forth. And for the Quran to institute the methodology of doubt, again, such a pioneering thing, preceded its time by at least 1,000 years. All right? نحن أولى بالشك من إبراهيم. We are more worthy and more deserving of the method of doubt than Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now, of course, some commentators would have a problem with all of this. They would say it is blasphemous to say that Ibrahim had any doubt. And essentially what the Prophet ﷺ really meant is that if Ibrahim was doubtful, then we would have been doubtful ourselves, because we are all Abrahamic, right? We are all the descendants of Ibrahim. And since we are not doubtful, then Ibrahim never was. That's a bit of a stretch. It's really like a stretch in interpretation to something that, in my opinion, seems pretty straightforward, and that is, Ibrahim doubted it, and we should too. We should ask all kinds of questions for the purpose or the sake of reaching the truth eventually. And the reason I say this is because, if you actually follow the ayah, so Ibrahim says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتِ. All right? Show me how you resurrect the dead. If Ibrahim had some type of an ulterior, innocuous motive, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have not said, أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ. Have you not believed? That response is only dedicated to someone who's having what? Doubt. Having doubt. Because the reaction itself is kind of a bit, scathing. أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ. Have you not believed? Right? No. Lord, I do believe. وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. I just need a little bit more certitude in my heart. That doesn't sound like doubt to you? It's a little bit. It still sounds a little bit of doubt. Some commentators would say, well, Ibrahim was not really doubting the process. He was not doubting the concept of resurrection. He was doubting the mechanism. He was doubting the process. So he just wanted to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts something together and brings it back to life, much like you asking the chair maker, how do you make the chair? I know that you're the one that made the chair, but if you can show me how you put the pieces together. But that inquisitive question would not, beg a negative response from me. Like I would not say, oh, you don't believe that I put the chair together? Like I wouldn't say that if I felt that the question is meant to just ask me about the mechanism. But essentially, because I think that he's questioning that I'm the one that put the chair together, I was like, well, what, you don't believe that I built the chair? No, 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 no. I really do believe. 99.9%. But I just need certitude in my heart. Okay? So that is why I'm inclined to say that the ayah essentially institutes or celebrates the notion of doubt. And subhanAllah, again, look at how pioneering Islam would be in that regard. You know, in other faiths, for example, you're not supposed to go and ask your priest, you know, at the Catholic Church about the confusion of the Trinity. You're not supposed to. They will be upset. They will say, some things need to be taken on faith. This is mysterious, and that's part of our faith, and you just have to accept it as is. You're not supposed to ask questions. All right? Whereas in the Islamic tradition, the very methodology of doubting things is celebrated per the letter of the Quran, and it was not only celebrated, it was practiced by one of God's greatest prophets. I want a little certitude. I want to know more. I know that you call me your friend and everything, but just show me. Show me how it all happens. All right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks, أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ قَالَ بَلَى وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. Lord, I do. Swear, I do believe. I just want more certitude in my heart. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically, you know, tells him, instructs him to do the following. قَالَ فَخُذْ أَرْبَعَةً مِنَ الطَّيْرِ فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ. Take 4 birds. Birds that are able to fly. They're not chicken. Okay? Take, you know, think of, what is the most annoying bird that you know of? Well, crow, I don't think that crow is annoying. Crow is hated because it's misunderstood, I think. Because it's associated with bad omens and stuff like that, the poor guy. But there is a particularly annoying bird. The peacock, maybe a little bit. Yeah, but you know, I don't know. Not a rooster. No, at least we can enjoy it at the end of the day. Pigeons, definitely obnoxious. Yes. Huh? What is it called? It's bird pets. You have 2 bird pets? They're both annoying? Just cook them. Cook them and enjoy them for dinner. All right. Parrots could be annoying. I want you to think of the most annoying bird species that you know of. Woodpecker, maybe. No. I think that we would disagree on what an annoying species of bird would be. I'm just saying. It's subjective. Yeah, exactly. It is subjective. So I want you in your mind to think of the absolute most annoying, obnoxious bird for you personally. Okay? And then take 4 of those birds of the same species, study them extremely well, know, you know, their feather patterns, know their colors, know, you know, their features, everything about them, so that you literally memorize who they are 100%, right? فَصُرْهُنَّ إِلَيْكَ. Bring them so close to you so that you're able to understand their qualities and their features 100%, right? قال فخذ أربعة من الطير فصرهن إليك. Take 4 of those birds, study them extremely well, bring them close to you, all right? ثم اجعل على كل جبل منهن جزءا ثم ادعهن يأتينك سعيا. Okay? Now, after that, after taking them in, bringing them closer, the scholars said, kill all 4 birds and then cut them up into small pieces and take the pieces and put 1 piece on random hilltops, scattered all over the place. Okay? And then stand there and call them one by one. They will come and fly to you, and I will put them all back together. Okay? So, again, think about this. If what Ibrahim was after was the mechanism of resurrection, that really doesn't tell us much. It doesn't tell us much. What Ibrahim wanted to see with his own eyes is a miracle. It's something that is dead, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts them back together and brings them back to life. He's not interested in the mechanism or how it actually happens and, you know, the chair maker putting the pieces together. That's not what he's after. He wants to see a miracle. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed him that miracle. Okay? This is how I resurrect things. You comfortable now? You happy now? Right? It's not that Ibrahim's faith was restored. His faith was very, very strong. But think of it this way. You can never really say that you have 100% faith, can you? Because faith by definition is a conviction. It's not actual real knowledge. It's not physical knowledge. That is, it is real knowledge, but it is not physical knowledge. It's metaphysical knowledge, right? And so faith, no matter what, falls 1 degree short of actual knowledge. Because if I have full knowledge that this pen exists, okay? But when it comes to matters of faith, it's a choice that I make, to believe in something that I have not seen, I have not experienced, okay? And so think of it this way. If your faith is 75, 80, 85%, something like this would bring your faith up to 90 or 95%, which means that there is still room for you to make a choice. Some of the best that I've read, in that regard was actually Ibn Taymiyyah's discussion on faith in one of his most classical but least known works, by the way, Dar'u Ta'arud al-Aqli wal-Naql. This was one of few philosophical works that Ibn Taymiyyah wrote. And I think that the book translates to basically he's trying to prove that there is no contradiction between aql, between the mind, and naql, which is revelation. All right? So showing or demonstrating that there is no contradiction between intellect and revelation. And in the book, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah actually says that reaching full certitude about the existence of God is not healthy, because it rids the human being of the choice to believe in God. Okay? So your faith needs to always remains a few degrees below certainty. If someone tells you, I have not a single ounce of doubt in me, then that person would literally be going against fitrah and would be going against human nature. Every single one of us will have some doubt in us. And that is healthy. It's healthy, because doubt drives the process of thinking. Doubt drives inquiry. Doubt drives asking questions. Doubt makes your faith actually stronger. But if you have no doubt, then God for you is just like any other object in the world that you just accept its existence. It brings no excitement. God for you is like the chair and the computer and all the other things that you know exist. Okay? It's not faith anymore. So Ibrahim alayhi salam followed the instructions. He went through the experiment. He brought the 4 birds, understood their qualities, killed the birds, cut them up to pieces, put their parts, on different hilltops, called them, and then they came, hastily flying towards him. And that institutes very, very important paradigms. Number 1, it's okay to be doubtful sometimes. Don't feel bad that you have a little doubt. If you read something in the news, or a friend at work, brought something up and say, oh, Muslims do this and Muslims say that, you felt weird about it in your heart. It's perfectly normal. It happens to all of us. If you have a really bad day, and before you go to bed, you scanned your day and you're like, just the world is just full of horrific things. I mean, you're already depressed. So you're already seeing the word through a negative lens as it is. But that too is normal sometimes. And so, you had some doubts. Is it really possible that if God exists, He's allowing all these horrific things to happen? We've been praying for Gaza, all this long, and I don't know. And then you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, and then you go to bed. Happens. And it's not wrong. Okay? Some doubt occasionally is actually healthy. Because like I said, it drives the questions and it drives inquiry. It renews your faith. Okay? Number 2, it's okay to use doubt to reach certainty. It's okay to use doubt as a springboard to do further research and to come ask the Imam and to come ask people of knowledge and try to understand things for yourself. Number 3, it's okay to share doubt with others that may be able to help. This is not something that you just want to keep to yourself. Of course, make sure that you don't share doubt with vulnerable people. Like if you're a parent, don't go share your doubt with little kids. That would be horrific. Okay? Share your doubt with, someone who has more knowledge, someone that can help you, right? Someone that may have a good perspective. So it's okay to share that, and that is what we've seen here, in this, incredible story. So that was the very last conversation in that section of the surah that basically addresses building the foundations of the right type of ideas, because the right type of ideas with regards to God and the universe and yourself is actually a prerequisite of building a godly civilization, and imaratul ard and so forth. And after this section is over, we now switch gears to focus on the other pillar of imaratul ard, which is al-mal, wealth. Okay? I said that this section says al-fikr al-mal, intellect or good ideas and wealth, that those are the pillars of imaratul ard. Okay? So we talk about mal a little bit. The ummah that is given the responsibility of building a godly civilization and to cultivate the earth for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to lead humanity to the Creator needs to not only have enough financial resources to carry out its mission, but to also understand intellectually what wealth is and what wealth means, and what the Islamic financial system looks like, and what the Islamic economic system looks like. One of the most horrific things that we've seen in the last 100 years is that the Islamic financial system is always claimed by one group or the other. So, I remember I would read, for instance, when the socialists were on the rise in the Arab world, right, in Syria and Egypt, in Iraq, right? The socialists, that was the thing in the 1960s and in the 1970s that everyone was talking about. Of course, socialism fell flat on its face as a system, right? It was sort of like a diluted or a muddled down version of communism that became very prevalent in the Arab world, right? They all said that the Islamic economic system is essentially socialist. They used to actually say that the Islamic economic system is socialist. And then, today the Emiratis and the Saudis and all the wealthy folks of the Arab world, they say that the Islamic economic system is essentially capitalist, right? And so we can't let this happen. There's got to be another way of thinking. And of course, I've also seen intellects that would argue, oh, well, the Islamic economic system is actually mercantilist. It's a mercantilist system. Or they would say, oh, it's a welfare system. And they actually keep borrowing Western terminology and impose that on the Islamic financial system. That is all wrong. It is not our job to try and fit the Islamic economic system to an existing a model or an existing template. Okay? That's not our job. Our job is to understand the essentials of the Islamic economic system and let the labeling happens later. We're not interested in labeling. Any system that achieves the fundamentals of the Islamic economic system would be an Islamic system. It doesn't matter, right? So that's, I think, what this section of the surah, is trying to teach you. The Islamic financial system hinges upon certain fundamental principles, and let me share some of those principles with you right now. Number one, true ownership resides in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Actual, true, meaningful ownership is only the ownership of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to everything, and we are just clients in the process. Our ownership is entirely temporary. We are only clients in the process. We call ourselves owners. We have a deed of trust of some property here or there, but ultimately, in the Islamic ethos emphasizes the notion that ownership is only divine. It is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that has true ownership. I've talked to you about this before. Sometimes, again, I live in Granite Bay, and then Granite Bay has a lot of granite. That's why they call it Granite Bay. And granite is so interesting because it has a massive historical significance. Native Americans use granite a lot. They use granite as, what we would call tables today, like little platforms where they cook their food and stuff like that. They use granite as mortars. So you constantly see like grooves in relatively level platforms of granite where they actually use mortars in order to grind, their grains and stuff like that. And whether it's the city of Roseville or the county of Placer, they would actually have a little sign next to these Native American granite relics that would describe the usage. Okay, so in our backyard there is a decent sized piece of granite. If you build anywhere around Folsom Lake, you always have to deal with a lot of granite. Like that is why construction over there is very expensive. And so I keep looking at this and I'm like, I'm just wondering the successive forms of ownership that took place to this piece of granite. At some point, maybe, in the pre-modern era, when it was just the Native Americans, I am just thinking to myself, it was probably one tribe after the other, because there was constant warfare. And those tribes were taking the properties from each other. So, today it was XYZ, tomorrow it's ABC. Maybe for a couple of hundred years it was with this tribe, and for a couple of hundred years it was with that tribe, all right? And then within the same tribe, this person would own the property for 50, 60 years and then sell it, or somebody else takes it, whatever. How many times did that piece of granite that has been in our backyard for thousands of years, right? This can't, it needs dynamite if you want to actually remove that thing, all right? Been there for thousands of years. How many hands did it change over the centuries? It was first the Native Americans with all of their own variations, and then the white man came here. Well, I mean, maybe I should say before the white man came here, it was the Mexicans, right? So the Mexicans must have, owned my house at some point before my house was even built. And then after the Mexicans, it was the whites. And how many people within that same group actually the property changed hands? I mean, you can imagine. Maybe tens of people or hundreds of people, God knows. And then after the whites, it was the new colonialists, the brown people, us, right? Think about it. You're all colonizers. We're all colonialists. Okay? We came here to stolen land that was taken forcibly from its owners, and we write deeds of trusts and we pay money to the thief that stole the land in order to take ownership of something that was not theirs in the first place. So I mean, think of this was stolen from me. And then someone took it and then sold it to their son. And then their son sold it to their daughter. And then their daughter sold it to her friend. And her friend sold it. Does that make it where this is not a stolen property just because it changed hands so many times? I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I was like, oh my God, I need to sell my Roseville property now. I'm not, this is a reality of life. But, let's not deny it at least. Let's at least be honest that we're all colonialists. One way or the other, this is just the nature of life. But the point is, today, wouldn't it be the most foolish thing for you to actually take your own ownership seriously after hearing all of this? Ownership, I think, for Uncle Sam means that you're the person, I need to collect taxes. Who's going to pay me taxes? You claim the deed, I need taxes from you. That's ownership for you. There is no true ownership in America. True ownership means I have this property, it's mine, it costs me nothing. All right, because I've already paid it off. But if you have ownership and you're still paying the bank, you don't really own it. You're deceiving yourself. If you have ownership and you're still paying your homeowners association, you're deceiving yourself. It's not real, right? If you have ownership and you're still paying taxes, it's not real ownership. Okay? If there is some type of an addendum attached to it, it's not really true. Even if you exist at a place where you literally pay absolutely nothing for your property, just the expenses, just the utility bills and stuff like that, it's still not true ownership. Why? Because sooner or later, you will die, or you will sell, and the ownership of that property is going to move into somebody else. The entire Western economic system is based on the assumption that ownership is real. Actually, that they call it real estate. It's so ironic. I think we're supposed to call it unreal estate, right? It's not real, but the Western economic system is based on the assumption that ownership of commodities is actually real and substantive. In the Islamic tradition, we know that it is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that owns things. That's a fundamentally philosophical notion about ownership that is very foundational. You have to start with this, okay? And then you build on this over time. Number two, Islam, despite that, okay, so you might say, oh my God, here we go. There's no true ownership. You know, that means like, that's it. The government is going to take everything. Like, what are you trying to say? I paid $750,000 for this house. No, no, no. We're not saying that. We're not trying to suggest that because it's not permanent ownership, that it is not yours temporarily. And if it is yours temporarily, Islam respects the rights of that short-term usage. For as long as you're still holding the deed, Islam respects your right. So I suppose that, you know, in the first sense, Islam is neither communist nor capitalist. Because communism also says there's no true ownership, because the only true ownership is that of the people, or that of society, okay? But of course, the government is a representative of the people, so it's just another way of saying the government owns anything. The second assumption, which is, you know, the Western assumption of the capitalist system, right? And that says if it is yours, if it is under your name, then you have every right to use it the way you see fit. You have the right to use it, live on it, sell it, rent it, make it into a farmland, you know, utilize it however way you want, as long as you're not harming other people. In the first sense, you know, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the second sense, maybe I guess you could say that there's some capitalism in this notion. It is yours, right? In a substantial sense. Not in a real sense, but in a substantial sense. And because of that, Islam also ensures all the transactional freedom that comes with that ownership. You have the right to use it. You have the right to sell it. You have the right to take money and use that money for your own benefit. All right, number 3. There needs to be a balance between individual and communal interests. And I think that is when we kind of move slightly away from the pure capitalist system, which, by the way, doesn't exist in the world anymore. You know, all these Republican conservatives that keep talking about, you know, the government needs to stay off of my property and minimize taxes and stuff like that, are the same people that want a very strong military, you know, are the same people that want intervention all over the world, are the same people that want stronger borders. You have to make up your mind. These are the same people that want stronger police force and so forth. You're still advocating for some heavy government spending one way or the other. All right? And so there has to be balance between individual economic rights and communal economic rights. Your rights end where other people's rights begin. All right? Number 4. There is blanket prohibition in Islam on all forms of transactions that end up harming the individual, harming society, or harming the consumer. You know, in American states, they always have like a consumer protection agency, right? Which is usually led by a former corporate executive, like, who used to use the absolute worst forms of corruption to pressure and lobby government agencies. They themselves become the leader of the government. It's like, you know, having the wolf be the guardian of you know, of the chicken coop. All right? Exactly. It's just, it really is crazy. Like, if you see like the Food and the Drug Administration, you know, the FDA, most of its executives were actually food executives. Oh yeah, because they come from the industry, they understand the ins and outs of the industry. No, it's because they're all in cahoots with each other, right? It's really laughable, but we understand, you know, that that's what happens in this country, and we kind of, sometimes we take it seriously, sometimes we don't take it seriously. When they tell you, you know, for example, if you look at food labels, and you keep reading, like, there is this constant pressure by the food industry not to indicate any daily nutritional needs for sugar, for instance. Like, you literally, everything else is always stated. Sodium, it tells you that this product will give you 4% of your daily sodium usage. Or vitamin B, or iron, or whatever, or fat. The only item that is stated in quantity, but it doesn't give you the daily usage is sugar. Why? Because your body doesn't need any sugar in the first place. And actually, anything you eat will far exceed your daily needs anyway, and so it would be destructive for the food industry. There is daily lobbying against government agencies not to include any information about the amount of sugar that goes into your body or how much of it your body needs. This is known knowledge, okay? And so some of you may choose to follow the labels, which I think is important sometimes in order for us to know, okay, is there any pork in this thing? You know, is there any alcohol in it? I need to know that. But don't deceive yourself and think, you know, Yellow Lake 16, because this particular chemical compound is approved by the FDA, that somehow that makes it healthy. I think that would be a massive amount of self-deception, all right? You're responsible for your own health, not the government. The government is not going to tell you how to live. You know, you need to decide for yourself how you're supposed to live, all right? But again, the reason I bring this up is that the Islamic financial system still keeps into account some balance between individual and communal interests. There has to be some type of regulation. There has to be some type of rules, some types of laws. Unfettered capitalism is not allowed in Islam, right? Unfettered monopoly, for example, this is another transaction that is haram. And so there, like I said, there is a blanket prohibition on transactions that end up harming the consumer. All right, I said monopoly. That would be one such transaction. Usury, right, would be considered, you know, one such transaction. Bay'ul gharar, right, deceptive forms of selling, where you're selling people air, or you're selling a product before it's manufactured, and stuff like that. You know, that would be also another form of haram transactions. You know, investing in haram products like drugs and alcohol, that would also be harmful for the consumer, so we cannot make money off of that. Gambling, you know, or games of chance in general, these are haram transactions. And so, again, in that particular regard, Islam definitely deviates from, you know, purebred capitalism. Okay? So to say that Islam is a capitalistic system, that would be a huge error. And to say that Islam is anti-capitalism is also a huge error, because it does, some practices in capitalism are compatible with Islam, some practices are not. Capitalism is entirely dependent on profitability. That's it. No other consideration. Profitability is important in Islam, and I will talk about that in a minute, but that is not the only consideration, and therefore Islam, the Islamic financial system, cannot be capitalistic in that particular sense. All right. Number 5, there has to be some type of solidarity in society. At-takaful. Social solidarity. Solidarity between individuals. You know, the idea of voluntarily sharing your wealth. Voluntarily donating. You know, subhanAllah, one of the most incredible things about the Islamic economic system was the usage of endowments. Al-awqaf. Right? It was literally the practical application of the concept of social solidarity. Right? Where people's donations were pooled together in order to create social institutions that were immune to government intervention, right? That were immune to taxation. Social institutions that were income generating, right? Muslims had a waqf for everything. There had a waqf that financed hospitals. They had awqaf that financed schools. They had awqaf that financed orphanages. They had awqaf that financed places where the elderly, you know, went to die with dignity. The Ottomans had awqaf for animals, right? For animals, for cats and dogs and stray, you know, creatures, to have a place where they're fed properly, dignified. Animals are dignified, right? Now, these types of practices of the welfare state certainly are not very capitalistic when you think about it, right? So as you can see, it borrows components, or I should say, Western economic systems borrow different components from the Islamic financial system, all right? So, and that is why when we look at this section of Surat al-Baqarah, there's so much emphasis on zakah, there's so much emphasis on sadaqah, there is emphasis on the distribution of sadaqah and who receives it and how it's calculated, you know, the ethics of giving it and the ethics of receiving it. Such a big deal. Why? Because in the Islamic financial system, charity is important. Solidarity between individuals is extremely, extremely important. All right? So these are basically the the principles of the Islamic financial system. Now, the Islamic financial system also has some qualities. Number 1, it is a godly system. Nizamun Rabbani. It's a godly system, okay? It's not man-made. and therefore does not reflect the interests of man, although it takes into account the interests of man, but ultimately serves the interests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which makes it, again, conducive to building a God-centric civilization. This is not about us. We're here to do God's work and not to invent our own purpose. All right? So this is, and because it is a divine system, it is not subject to evolution. It's not subject to mutations. All right? We cannot just change the rules because the situation, compels it. We can't do that. It's been 1400 years, and there's still active debates in the Muslim community, in the Muslim world, about bank interest, about mortgages, about financing businesses and projects and so forth. What is a Sharia compliant transaction? What is a Sharia non-compliant transaction? Active conversations to this day. Literally 2 days ago, I'm still getting people in the community asking me, I want to buy a house. What's the best way to do that? There is obviously the conventional loans, but then there is also the path of musharaka and the path of murabaha and all these halal transactions that we see laid out in the Islamic tradition, right? So it is a divine system, or a divinely designed system, and not a man-made system. Number two, it takes into consideration the essentials of human nature. And that is so important. It does not expect something impossible out of human beings either, right? It does not expect man to forego his or her natural tendency to own things and to possess things and to vie for his or her own self-interest. Communism, for instance, came entirely against human nature because it told people you need to forget that part of you that wants to own things. You're not going to own anything anymore. It all belongs to the people, which is just another way of saying it all belongs to the government. So people did not own apartments. They did not own cars. It was all shared. It's just weird. Like when I drive my car, I want to say that this is my car. I don't want to say that this car belongs to our neighborhood. And then everyone can just drive it. And then I start fighting over it. He drove it 2 hours and I drove it only an hour and a half. Why does he get to drive it a little bit more than me? And then someone would cause a problem, and then the car has an issue. How does the car get fixed when no one really takes ownership in that product? All of that goes against human nature. All right. So Islam takes into full consideration the desires for success, the desires for freedom, the desires for liberty, vying for your own self-interest, which again, the manifestations of human nature. It opposes communal ownership, right? It opposes excessive regulation that would tell people what to buy and what not to buy, and the fixation of prices and stuff like that, all unnatural and all un-Islamic. Okay, you go to some Muslim countries, in order for them to basically regulate the prices, they fix the prices. So they tell tomatoes, the pound of tomatoes cannot be sold more than $1.50. What happens when you impose actual prices? You're creating what? You create a black market. Because the commodity has a real value. You're just suppressing that real value. In the actual market, it's going to cost $5 and not $1.50. You can lie to yourself all you want. All you're doing is that you're encouraging criminal behavior. People are going to go under, there's going to be scarcity in the product because no one is going to want to sell it below its value, okay? And so people are going to be selling tomatoes under the table. Hey, I have a pound of tomatoes, but you're going to have to pay $6 for that. It's illegal, but it's reflective of human nature. No one wants to sell something below its value. We can't. We don't like to do that. No one would ever do that, right? And so fixation of prices, all of this excessive regulation, heavy regulation of the market, some regulation is okay, but excessive regulation is not okay. So the Islamic financial system, responds very, very favorably to the essentials of human nature. Number three, the the third quality of the Islamic economic system or financial system is that it is balanced. It derives balance and it implements balance. Balance between many things. Balance between the needs of the individual and the needs of society. Society cannot have anything at the expense of the individual. Society is made of individuals. But the individual cannot have whatever they want at the expense of society. All right? And so you cannot basically say, I'm just going to build my factory in the midst of a residential neighborhood, and all the pollution and the waste products that's come out of my factory, they're just going to go destroy everyone else's homes and health. Islam would not allow that. There has to be some type of regulation that stops something like this from happening, right? The eminent domain concept, for example, okay, that initiated in the Islamic tradition. You know, when the Abbasis were trying to build, you know, the water channels that they built all over the Muslim world, right? That would basically carry water from the lakes, you know, on mountain tops, and would incline the channel a little bit so the water continues to flow all the way until it reaches the city. You know, you see it today in Istanbul. You see it actually in Mecca, right? You know, you see it in Spain, absolutely, right? All of this was inspired by the engineering of the Abbasis, okay? These are public projects. Or highways, for example, where a road needs to be built between two cities. Well, guess what? Whether it's water channels or public highways, they need to go through what? They need to go through people's properties. You have to take a piece of someone else's property. So you cannot just say, you know what, the government is just going to take that by force. There has to be proper compensation that is agreed upon by the owners of that property. So you can't come and say, I'm going to take, like, you know, 2.5 acres of your property because, you know, there's a stretch of the highway that is going to passing through under the, you know, the clauses of eminent domain, as they do here in California. There was actually this big fight a few years ago when they're invoking eminent domain clauses in order to take people's lands to build the high rail, right? The California high rail that is, you know, keeps stalling. It's the most unfortunate thing that, you know, a state like California, we don't even have, like, except maybe 1 or 2 train lines. And we don't have this network of trains that connects the entire state, you know, together. Like the smallest European country, right? You can literally travel from, you know, London all the way to Moscow, you know, using train, right? Exactly, of course, of course. No, we understand that, but the point is, even when the time comes and that actually happens, you can't just take people's land. There has to be respect to individual rights. So there's always this balance between individual and communal rights, okay? Individual and society. Number 2, there is balance between matter and spirit, balance between mundane considerations and religious or transcendental considerations, you know, working, you know, in tandem. There is balance between freedom and responsibility. You are free to a certain extent, but you also have to show some sense of responsibility as you conduct your affairs. There is balance between stability, which is really important, and growth. Too much stability leads to stagnation. Too much growth leads to instability, okay? So the Islamic economic system designed so that it enhances both stability and incremental growth so that it does not come at the expense of stability. It strikes a balance between production and consumption. You cannot overproduce that there will be a lot less demand and the value of the commodity is going to go down and people are going to lose money. Okay? So maybe some regulation is needed in that regard. Or very low production, in which case you're creating artificial scarcity, the price of commodity is going to go up, and then some people are going to make so much money. There has to be some balance in that regard as well. Number 4, the Islamic financial system is based in ethical considerations. Like I said earlier, the capitalist system is entirely based on profitability. Okay? As long as you follow these set of laws that are entirely man-made, by the way, okay? It's not about good and bad anymore, it's about legal and illegal. Okay? Forget about good and bad. You know, all of that is not important. What matters is that whether it's legal or illegal. Okay? So if you do it legally, you're fine. It doesn't matter how you make your money. You make your money from weapons, you make your money from pharmaceuticals, you make your money from pornography, you make your money from alcohol, you make your money from marijuana. It doesn't matter as long as it is legal. Like, you don't ask yourself, okay, wait, why is it that, okay, the state of California, for example, at some point, marijuana was illegal. I mean, it's still illegal. In federal law, it's still illegal. You know, Congress never legalized marijuana, by the way. But most states have already, you know, taken measures in order to, you know, to legalize. Okay? So I get these brothers, you know, after a few years ago when the state of California started, you know, deregulating marijuana and so forth, and they're asking whether or not they could invest in marijuana dispensaries. So why are you even asking that question? Is it because it's legal? It's now legal. Okay, the fact that it is haram doesn't matter to you? Legality is not the only criterion here. We have a whole other criteria that we need to follow. Is this an ethical practice? Is this something that brings good to society? Does it make the world better? Does it build a godly civilization? See, like that's the essential of Surah Al-Baqarah. Does it build a godly civilization? Does it make the world a better place? You have to ask yourself. When some Muslims, for example, I mentioned this before, they own convenience stores, and they ask about whether it's halal for them to sell alcohol. And of course I say, absolutely not. You cannot profit off of alcohol. I said, I don't sell it to Muslims. I only sell it to the kuffar. Okay? Oh wow. You don't see these guys with the masjid, by the way, like they're not religious, but they use the word kuffar because now it helps their case. I was like, even if you're selling it to non-Muslims, does that sound like something a Muslim would do? Like you'd be responsible for accidents, you'll be responsible for deaths, you'll be responsible for depression, you'll be responsible for people who have liver disease and cirrhosis, you'll be responsible for divorce, you'll be responsible for infidelity, you'll be responsible for all kinds of horrific social consequences. You really want that on your conscience? Do you think that something like this could even potentially be halal? Right? And so the Islamic financial system is based in ethical considerations. It's not just about profitability, it's about how it impacts the environment. So I guess in that particular sense, the Islamic system would be slightly socialist, where we don't just allow anything if it destroys the environment, right? So it has to be ethical in that regard. It has to bring good to society. It has to bring value to people's lives. Like if you engage in something that is the absolute most frivolous thing, for instance, you develop apps, and those apps really bring absolutely no value to people. Like, just they cause people to sit on their phones extra hours and just their brains are melting. Okay? You have to ask yourself, is this an ethical consideration? Do I need to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Lord, what I did in my dunya was to develop this stupid app that was downloaded by millions of people, and it had absolutely zero value whatsoever. Right? Maybe it's not haram, but it would not be the right thing to do in accordance with the Islamic financial system. Right? Truthfulness, transparency, cooperation, social solidarity, ihsan, impact on the environment. All of that is just as important as profitability. These are all qualities of the Islamic system. So with this in mind, every economic system, every financial system that follows these premises is considered an Islamic system. You call it whatever you want to call it. Every country in the world, every group of people in the world, this is not just about countries, by the way. This is also about you and your practices as a consumer. What do you do at home? How do you conduct your own affairs? How do you invest your money? Which venture do you use? Are you in the stock market? Are you in real estate? How do you invest? Okay, these considerations apply to you. So don't say, well, I need to move to Malaysia because they follow the Islamic system better over there. That's not the point. The point is what is it that you do with your own money in order to make sure that you follow the Islamic financial system. So I will stop here, inshallah ta'ala, and next time we're going to delve into the ayat and learn more directly about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us in this section of Surah Al-Baqarah, about a sound financial system and sound financial practices that lead to the establishment of a God-centric civilization. So inshallah, I'll take some questions, and we're gonna stand up for Salat al-Maghrib in just a couple of minutes, about 8:30. Inshallah. Please.
Today, it's a continuation of the topic of death and life that Nimrud and Ibrahim once did. And as you can see, Imam Shara was talking that, hey, when Ibrahim mentioned death and life, right? Namrud said, I give life and I give death.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And moved straight, Ibrahim moved straight away.
He didn't waste time in.
Didn't waste time.
Right.
Right? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after that came back to the story of
The birds.
Uzayr.
Oh.
Uzayr,
Mm.
right? Where there are so many different forms of death and life. Temporary death, 100 years of sleep. Right? Complete death and resurrection. Right? And the food that was halal tahar did not even change at all.
Mm.
That's one experience. And then comes the doubt of Ibrahim alayhi. So he connected that question or that first interaction between the movement to these two stories. Right? And it says the death and give life and give death, it's not what you're talking, it's way deeper, multiple scenarios of life and death that are temporary or permanent. That's well.
Agreed.
The other thing that I want to ask the question is, Ibrahim alayhi salam did not say, oh, I just want to wrap my head around or to wrap my brain around. He said, وَلَكِنْ يَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي.
Mm.
So the question is there a doubt in the mind and a doubt in the heart? And if there are, what's the difference? Right? If not, is actually the doubt always in the heart?
That's a great question. So, to address your first point, I think you're absolutely right. There's a connection between the stories, and actually, Qurtubi draws that connection very clearly. So he says, this question was raised here, but then Allah Subhanahu wa Taala addressed it in the next story, and so forth. I should have done a better job, I think, connecting the three stories. I figured because each story addresses one particular aspect of divine ideas, so I separated them. But they're definitely organically connected, as you had indicated. Now, going back to your second point, which is, intellectual versus spiritual doubt. Is that what you're referring to? And whether there is a difference or not. And so, I personally do not think that it is possible to have an intellectual doubt. I think the intellect only has limitations, that's all. The intellect helps you reach a certain level of certitude, okay? And then your heart gets you a couple of degrees beyond that, okay? And so, for example, if every single time I go into a room and that room is dark, if every time I go into that room, and 10 times in a row, and every time I open the door, that room is dark, okay? When I try to enter that room the 11th time, I will assume what? I will also assume that it is dark, okay? Is that an intellectual or a heart doubt? That is not an intellectual doubt, because there is no association. Even if it's dark 10 times, it's very possible that someone went in and turned on the light before the 11th time. But your intellect, your mind inadvertently makes associations. Now, I need to believe in the possibility that someone may have gone inside and turned on the light, and that's not an intellectual matter. Now that's when the heart goes, inshallah, someone went in and, inshallah, my wife turned on the lights, so that I don't have to do it every single time. That's not an intellectual, undertaking anymore. And so the scholars actually say that Ibrahim alayhi salam, in his mind, he is already talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's already a conversation between him and God. He's already seen enough in his own experience with the Creator, but he was hungry for more. He was hungry for that additional certitude that will make him never, ever, ever question things ever again. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, granted him that extra little piece that put his heart at ease. So I don't know if that addresses your question, comprehensively or not, but that's how I feel. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Yes, I had a question. We discussed the existence, that it is basically a form of perception.
Mm-hmm.
So something perfect must then exist. But how do we reconcile that if existence itself is being questioned, how do we reconcile that existence is being discussed as a prerequisite in this argument? You see my point?
Right. So you're basically refuting the ontological argument, and that is one of the responses that they used. Right. Immanuel Kant, who is a believer himself, but he rejected the ontological argument because he said that the argument makes the assumption that existence is a quality of an object when it is not the quality of an object as much as color or texture is a quality of an object. And so if it was a quality of an object, then its absence would affect its perfection. But precisely because existence is not a quality, existence is a prerequisite. It has to happen first before that object has any qualities. It has to exist in order to possess qualities. So this is a legitimate response to ontology, but they did try to get around this, right? And so because they say that existence can be both physical and metaphysical. So they say God exists either as a reality or as a conception of the mind. So if we're talking about his existence, one way or the other, that has already been met, either in the mind or in the real world, right? Now, and because it exists, then the quality is established, and the mind has a notion of perfection, and if God doesn't exist, then that notion of perfection makes God imperfect, and that would be a contradiction. Therefore, God must exist. But again, I don't want to delve too deep into that. This is what drove philosophers crazy over 1,000 years. So we're not going to resolve it tonight for sure. Any other questions?
I have one more.
Please.
So this is regarding the zakat system. You see how the importance of zakat has been established in Surat Baqarah. It's in fact the second most important thing that is emphasized after salah, right? So the point is that after the passing of the Prophet ﷺ, there were the Rida wars, as you mentioned,
Yes.
right? And it seems like from the discussion that you presented today that zakat is an integral entity for the developing of the Islamic economic system. But it is also considered as a voluntary act. And hence certain countries collect zakat as a form of compulsion by the state, and then certain countries just say, okay, this is voluntary, give it to the poor as we can afford or otherwise.
Right.
And based on that issue, Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anha then had to do Rida wars. So it seems like his decision was obviously correct, but certain sects question his decision of actually going after the Muslims and then going to go the Rida war. So how do we have an reconciliation of, seems like it should be collected by the state, it is part of the Islamic economic system, but then again it is questioned.
That's a great question, and I don't know if I have time to properly address this question, but just a very, very quick summary. In the initial phases of the Islamic State, zakah was collected centrally. And what those tribes did is that they didn't say, we're going to spend our zakah locally on the local poor people. They denied the expenditure of zakah in the first place. And so the portions of it that were spent locally and the portions that were given to the state, as a form of taxation. And so it was necessary to fight them because, not because they denied, a religious obligation, but because they affected the very integrity of the state. This was their attempt to secede. They were not just saying we're not going to pay money. They thought that zakah was an homage that is paid to the government of Abu Bakr, and then they refused to do that, which was a declaration of war. They basically said it was tantamount to secession, so they needed to be fought. Now, as long as the Islamic economic system is healthy, and there are forms of taxation that is being imposed locally and federally and so forth, there is enough revenue that is coming in that enables the government to achieve, its public projects and its public works and stuff like that, then zakah is usually invested locally. But when there is any type of shortage, in Baytul Mal, so to speak, in central, in the central bank, then the zakah is channeled centrally and then is spent by the government peripherally. And so we've seen both practices in Islamic history. And the point is, there has to be a mechanism to ensure that people are paying their zakah. It's not just a voluntary matter, if that is what you're asking. In a Sharia compliant state, there will be internal mechanisms that would actually investigate people's income, and they would collect their zakah from people accordingly, which is not very different when you think about it from Western systems of taxation, right? And so that is, I think, if that is precisely what you're asking, then I would say it's certainly something that needed to be enforced and that is legally enforced in the Islamic setting. All right. So inshallah, we're going to stop here. We need to pray Salat al-Maghrib. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik. Shadu la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal asr insana fi ghusr alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. Tawasaw bil haqq, tawasaw bis sabr. Inshallah, thank you. We'll see you guys next Friday. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.